here we go. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason Flame, host of the Master Motivation podcast, and excited for another great guest today. Apologize that I missed last week. We had some technical difficulties, but here we are. We're on with Mr. Bryan Carroll, who is an accomplished American producer, director, writer, and editor whose career in Hollywood began at just 19 years old. He quickly rose through the ranks, working alongside legendary editors on films like Predator, Die Hard, and City Slickers. As one of the youngest editors in the industry, Bryan helped launch HBO's first original series, Tales from the Crypt. He later teamed up with Michael Mann on projects including Collateral and Public Enemies, and founded his award-winning company, Gnarlynow Entertainment. His passion for storytelling shines in the acclaimed documentary, Why We Ride, and the National Geographic film, Living in the Age of Airplanes, narrated by Harrison Ford. Bryan's diverse credits also include Titanic, Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, and the award-winning short film Night Shift, executive produced along Viola Davis. Bryan, what's up, man? Good to see you.
Nice to see you too, Jason. Great to see you, man. I see you at the gym all the time. You're in your mode, so I'm like, I'm gonna stay on my mode.
got the headphones on, and we're just going to work, right?
Yeah.
Hey, you may have liked that opening video. That was actually created by a good friend of ours, Mike Surgot. Created that opening video for me.
Awesome. Fun.
Yeah.
Fun.
I always love when I watch the guest's face as they're watching the video as we're going through, and it seems like every time the pro wrestling comes up, everybody's eyes get wide.
Oh, yeah. For Mike, that's pretty calm. So
yeah. Hey, so gosh, I'm excited to have you on. It's been over a year in the making. We've been talking about doing this for a while, and here we are. So I just want to give you a minute just to kind of open up, introduce yourself a little bit more, tell us maybe something that we didn't hear in the opening credit, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I mean, kind of Bryan Carroll. I'm been working in the movie business for almost 38, 39 years now. I still can't believe I'm in this business. I mean, I grew up in a little town called Bountiful, Utah, where you either were a football star or you joined the Marines, which is what I thought I was going to be doing, or you worked at Geneva Still at Kennecott Copper. And my mom, fortunate enough, moved us kids down here when I was 14 to California and changed our life. You come to California from another state, you're so optimistic when you get here. It's like you can do anything. You can do anything. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of like you said. I'm fortunate enough to do what I'm passionate about, and I still can't believe that I get to do this. And sometimes I wonder why I'm doing this, which is why I still. If you don't hate it a little bit, you really don't love it. That's kind of the
right.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I got to ask, moving from Utah to California, and it's been, I'm sure, quite a number of years. But what was like kind of the biggest, I don't know, culture shock, or what was the biggest difference moving from Utah to California?
Oh, opportunity. When you're like I said, when you're in that little town of Bountiful, Utah, and also the culture was very much like stay in your place. You know what I mean? We weren't part of the children, so there was only a small group of us. It was I always look at, like, when I was a kid, I love cars. My family's very much into racing. We love racing. We race motorcycles, we race cars, whatever it is. But as a kid, I remember you'd look in magazines, you'd see Porsches and stuff like that. And you came to California and you saw a Porsche on the road. Yeah. And that was like, well, that could possibly be obtainable. You know what I mean? Or my mom, we bought a home. We owned a home in California. For me, the biggest culture shock was when I came to California is that if you work, you can do anything. You can work hard. That was the biggest, is the opportunity. I kind of equate it to what my grandfather or my great grandfather probably felt when they came over from Greece and Ireland. They probably was to America. It was like, well, the land of opportunity. To me, when I moved to California, and we moved to Newbury Park, which was a little town at that time as well. You used to have to say Thousand Oaks because nobody knew what you said. Right. But it was just like, oh my gosh, you could do anything. One of my first, I got a job at 14 on a sailboat, and then one of my great first jobs is working at the gas station there on Windy. And it was like, you could work overtime. You could work 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and you get time and a half, and you get double time. And it was the biggest culture shock to me was the acceptance. It didn't really matter who you are, where you came from in California. I thought there was just overall, but the biggest thing was you could make it here bigger than you could anywhere else. And you just felt this like, I could do this. You know what I mean? I can do anything here. The opportunity is endless in this place. And I still feel that about this state. I really do. It's a little tougher now being a business owner because we're older and stuff, but that was the biggest culture shock to me, was just how you could just become whatever you wanted to become.
And was it always the dream to get involved with the movie industry? I mean, I know you had a lot of interest in cars and racing, motorcycles, all the different things. But when you were a kid growing up, like, is that what you wanted to be?
It's when I was a kid, flying, of course, always to me was like looked so cool because my father was a pilot, both grandfathers were pilots, so flying's always, that's what my son's going off to be now. You know what I mean? So it's always in the family. But what it was is when I was 10, when movies used to come out in the 70s, they'd only come out to like 10 or 12 theaters, and there were small theaters. Salt Lake was one of them. And what they do is they test the audience. And then they'd be out for a couple of weeks, and then they pull them back, and then they call a limited release, and then they come out a little bit more. Well, the great thing about being close to Salt Lake City is we had one of those theaters there, and when I was 10, Star Wars came out. So we were one of the 12 theaters that got to see Star Wars. And when I saw Star Wars, it was life-changing to me. One, it was so black and white, good versus the evil, hope, you know what I mean? And I was like, that would be really amazing to do, because I was a pretty shy kid growing up, spent a lot of time alone, which meant I had an imagination like nobody could have. I would put on music and soundtracks and like create stories in my head. And I just had a big imagination as a kid, and music had a big part of that. And I mostly listened to movie soundtracks, like Ian Marconi, who did all the Sergio Leone films, like Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and stuff. So when I saw Star Wars, I was like, that would be amazing to tell stories. And I wrote little stories in school about little fun ones called The Patriots, about colonizing, and another one called Space Race. So I'd write little stuff, but being in Utah and being in that world, it wasn't obtainable. It was like, that would be really cool, but I need to stay in my place. I'm going to be a Marine. That way I can get my pilot's license. I'll fly helicopters for the Marine. So again, it was like, it's something I wanted to do, but you didn't have that confidence, I guess, right? But when I came to California, it was like, well, wait a minute, this is kind of cool now, right? This is something I could do. And then my mom, my stepfather, who was an amazing man, he was in the business. He got me to the right places, but I had to go through, there's all the unions and stuff. But so I was like, oh, well, wait a minute, there's an opportunity to do this. Like, well, freaking grab on with both hands and go. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what it was. It was just like, we got to do this, And I also love the aspect of, most of us are independent contractors. We're our own corporation. We have to be a loan out. You know what I mean? So you're still running your little business as your own little family business, but you're working within the movie business. Very much like construction.
Right.
So,
well, so going back to being a kid with an imagination. I think of our kids and how, like you and I, when we were little, like especially with Star Wars, and we could do a whole show just talking about Star Wars, by the way. But like growing up, I mean, I remember watching movies like Star Wars and Clash of the Titans and all these things. And I would literally go outside, find something, like make a sword with it, like find something, make a helmet with it. We just had these different imaginations. And I think you would agree that we look at our kids and their imagination is different, right? I mean, they still have their own form of imagination, but it might come from what they saw on TikTok or YouTube versus, they saw it in a movie once and then they just like kind of ran with it for a while. Right. It's just such a different, and I was reading something about this the other day, and it just made me really think like, wow, that's just crazy that kids like just don't go outside and play anymore.
Yeah, you couldn't get us in the house. We had to be dragged into the house. Even when we moved to Newbury Park, we were in this awesome cul-de-sac with all a bunch of other kids. We were in that cul-de-sac playing football or baseball or whatever. But when we were little kids, I mean, whatever we saw influenced us to go do and act that out. But we were pretty much always acting as children. We're always playing this, or let's go. We might go, let's go. I'll be the good, you be the bad, I'll be the ugly. Let's go play. I mean, we played a lot of war. I mean, that was a big one. Like we were always shooting each other with something. You know what I mean? Or space stuff. Or we just always had these imaginations going all the time. A lot of it was like, for me, was I'd hear a song and I'd put that song on and play those events out. So we lived in our head a lot, but it was so fun and inventive because you were just always, I don't know, it's the day flew by. It's something now I have to catch myself doing is Tammy will go like, go over here. I'm like, oh, okay, sorry. You have to put in my head a lot. Today it's interesting because they're influenced, but I think our children are influenced with so much content that there's not that much left to be imagined or possibly about. I'm sure they're still doing it,
Right.
but the tools they have now get them so far there. So it's I kind of wanted to get in their head and say, like, how are they being? You know what I mean? What's going on in there? Because I think we had a lot more space in our head to create stuff than they get to have, because we didn't have it was a lot harder. We just needed something little, and we would fill in the rest.
Right. Right.
You
No,
know?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I want to invite anybody that's watching us live today, as we get started, to go into some questions for Bryan. If you have specific questions of your own, or you have a favorite memory, or just want to say hi, please just drop us some comments. And while you're watching the video, do me a favor, hit that share button and let everybody else join in on this as well. I just want to dive in. You started in Hollywood at just 19 years old. What was it like breaking into the industry so young? And what do you remember about most of those early days?
The first job was being a driver, because so I was working at Canal Cabinets on the weekends, still working at Chevron at night, but then I got a job as a driver at a place called CRC. And in those days, it was still film. And what CRC would do is they would do all your opticals for you, dissolve, stuff like that. So I was delivering to assistant editors, which was awesome. So I was building what we call a Rolodex. I was meeting all these assistant editors. I didn't really know what they did, but I know there was no clocks on the wall, and they were all just jamming. It was like film, and there was an energy, and that's what attracted me is energy, the energy of life that's out there, that the universe puts out there. That's what attracts me, and I'm like, this is awesome, And then when I finally was able to get on a show as an apprentice called Project X, but they still had what do you call it? They still had lots of seniority. So another apprentice was on there, so I got on this low budget show called The Predator with John Link, and I was like, well, first it was like, oh, you're going to be working 70, 80 hours a week. I'm like, fine with me. That's double time and golden time. You know what I mean? And it ended up being sometimes over 100 hours a week. And that movie got up. That was Joe Silver. And then after that, so it became really big. And that's how we linked up and got to stay on that. The biggest thing for me, again, was it was a lot the same feeling when I came to California. I was like, I can't believe I'm here. I'm like, this is awesome. And always trying to remind yourself, to be grateful. Like, remember that this is really rare. You know what I mean? So I think that was the biggest thing. Part was I can't believe I'm here. And two was like, I can't believe I get to work this many hours. I love that that I can just, like, sure, I'll work 7 days a week. Sure. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You can make so much money just by working really, really hard. And that came from when I was in high school. Me and a buddy of mine started a landscaping business. And we're going like, we're 17, 18 years old doing landscaping, and we're making a killing. And it's like, again, to me, it was always fascinating how easy it was to work. And if you worked hard, it was like everybody just like rewarded you for just doing your job. If you know what I mean. It was right. It very much gave me I think one of the biggest things that happened after Predator when I was on is I said, you know what, I'm barely made it through high school. I just was not that kind of a kid. I made a few months at Moorpark College, which was okay, fun, but I wasn't that kid. I wasn't a school kid, but I knew that I could outwork anybody else. And I kind of took that mantra as it's like, you know what, it doesn't matter what I know or what I can't. I love to read. I read all the time. I've learned most of my life out of reading or talking to other people, having lots of mentors. But what I came out of with is very much what my grandparents and parents did, is just work harder than anybody else. And that's kind of the biggest thing I took out of that kind of launched me in the business, is having that attitude, like doing the most difficult shows where you can get the most hours, working with the most difficult people, because that's where the most opportunity is going to be. And that has served me well through most of my life. It's just, I'll outwork you. I'll put in more hours. I will sleep less.
Yeah. Well, I want to touch on that in just a second, but I was kind of laughing a little bit when you mentioned Rolodex. Like, some people that are watching this right now have no idea what a Rolodex is, but it would be the same as like kind of creating your friends list on Facebook and kind of building this community or this contact list. But you talk about work ethic, and I think that that's something that you and I have a lot in common, and something that I grew up with, knowing that my dad was probably the hardest working person I've ever known in my life. 60, 70, 80 hours a week, like, was not a big deal, because like you love to work. There's a lot of drive there, but looking at I was just in a meeting today, a Rotary meeting. One of the comments from the speaker was, it's hard to find people with a good work ethic. It's hard to find people that really want to work. And do you think that's because they don't want to work hard or because they haven't found what they're passionate in yet?
I think it's a combination of a couple of things. I think one, we grew up very much seeing our parents work extremely hard. We had the stories. We were most of us within one or two generations of our family that came over from another country, so we heard of those stories. Also, we heard the stories of our grandparents, World War II and the Depression, and I think so. There's, I feel we were the last of that where we had an obligation to work hard. Which like our grandparents got us here, our parents got us here, as RW is here. So I think it was just kind of like, I kind of feel like we were towards the tail of that. Like, no, you got to work hard, and because everybody before you did, and we believe in sacrifice, and that's a word you don't hear a lot today, even in coaches. I don't hear that. Mike, when I was coming up playing sports, coach, you must sacrifice. You must, it's like that's just a word. And I think about, I don't even know if I use that word much on my kids in a weird way, but I remember growing up hearing that word a lot. It was my mom always made us play one sport, or at least one sport, and play one instrument because both those require sacrifice. You know what I mean? As we got older, she's like, you want to play two sports, one that's a team sport, so you learn that, but you also must have an individual sport. You know what I mean? Whether that be boxing or racing or karate or something like that, because you need both those. But everything required sacrifice, and it's just not a word that I don't know if I've used it on my children a lot growing up, but I heard it about everything. And if something came up, you say, well, do you know how much your father sacrificed so that you could have this? It didn't even need to be said. We knew that. You know what I mean? So, but what I'm finding now is partly probably because a lot of our generation's fault is I think we did, a lot of us in our generation were successful, and we probably spoiled our kids way more than we were. And so we kind of, we were the most, people joke about Gen X as we were the most like, let go generation there was. And then our wives turned into helicopter moms on our kids, and Life 360 and all that. So it is that, I think there's that as well, but I do find that it's maybe it's because you don't have to as much. Maybe I don't know, but I agree with you. It is very, very hard for me to hire anybody under 30. Because there is very much this, well, I can't work tomorrow, or I can't do this. And maybe there's something in the middle that's good. Maybe we were too much all about work. I definitely, my family sacrificed a lot because I was not around a lot. But at the same time, I'm hunter-gatherer. That's kind of the way I was raised. We go out, we kill mammoth, and you know what I mean? So that the family can survive. And there is a system that's worked for thousands of years. And I do still believe in that system. A strong father figure at home and stuff like that. But that has to happen. But no, I do agree. But I also feel kids don't have to grow up as fast as we did. We grew up pretty quick. You know what I mean? I remember 2021, I was kind of on my way and killing it. I mean, just like, and had worries like anybody else, had payments, am I going to have a next job? You know what I mean? So I also think we, because of not having a lot of the technology, and see what's out there, we grew up pretty good. Also, our generation wasn't told, be a kid. You look at most of the commercials today, even a Chevy truck commercial, never grow up, be a kid. We were told the opposite. We wanted, we were almost growing up too quick. I remember a lot of times like, stop, you got plenty of time to grow up. You'll be an adult the rest of your life. I remember trying to be an adult much quicker, where I feel my kids' generation are kind of like, they're in no rush to grow up. Yeah.
It's funny because I've actually had to remind Madison, probably more than Mason, the opposite. Like, slow down, relax. You're not behind. She's 23. She wants to be buying a house now, and I'm like,
yep.
That's awesome that you have that drive. But like, it's not something that you have to be doing right now. I mean, fortunately, she went to school, she's done all the right things, she saved a lot of money. And it's like, but there's no like have to. And you're right. Like, I was out at 18, 19 years old. I started my business, 19 years old, bills, responsibilities, got married fairly early. And it's like, we did. And I remember my mom telling me the same thing. You don't have to grow up so fast. I'm like, but I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to have what you have, kind of type of thing. So yeah, absolutely. I agree with all of that. I want to get back to the movies a little bit
Yeah.
because, man, I mean, we could talk about movies a lot. But you worked on Die Hard, you worked on Predator. What's some behind the scenes stories on one or both of those that makes you smile or just makes you kind of like, what the hell was that?
Well, I say one of the greatest things about my business is I kind of have a new job every year to 14 months, because what happens when you work on a film, you're completely involved in it, whether you're a PA, an editor, a director, a producer, whatever that is. You're completely involved. And so what happens is you learn a lot about that subject. Like when I was doing Free Willy, I learned a lot about killer whales. I got to touch his tongue in the tank and watch him train. And so there's all this this stuff going on. Predator was kind of low budget. So they were doing, as a first-time director, John McTiernan. So they were still trying to figure it out, and they literally had to stop filming for 6 months and redesign the Predator, because the original Predator kind of looked like a praying mantis. And I remember kids once we were watching dailies, which is where they shoot every day, then they develop, the next day we watch the film. And at that time, they were trying to figure out how to make this thing move through the trees. There wasn't many visual effects yet. So they had this monkey, and they had to dress this monkey completely in red, because since the forest was green, you couldn't do the green screen, which we see a lot today. So the monkey was in red. I remember watching dailies, and they're like, 1, 2, 3, go. And it's like the monkey jumps from one tree to another tree, and goes to another tree, and then boom, takes off into the forest next time. So, and then you have to run to get the guy. So, yeah, so it was like, there was little fun things like that.
Yeah.
That would happen. But what I loved was what I learned when we were making Roadhouse, which is one of my favorite movies I worked on. Didn't make a lot of money, but everybody has seen it. It's one of those movies, right? They're with Patrick Swayze and Samuel L. two of the nicest, most professional people I've ever worked with.
Should never have been remade, by the way. Should never have been remade.
Will not see that. Will not see that. No. But I remember sitting with some of the trainers, and one of the guys who was a professional cooler who came back east, and he was telling me about, coolers and bouncers, because I knew what a bouncer was. He says 2 entirely different things. And he taught us, he's like, a bouncer is about being proactive. Bouncers are really big, muscly guys out front. They're meant to stop it before it happens, meaning it's about intimidation so nothing happens. But if something goes down, 280-pound guy is not going to be able to split it up. That's when these coolers come in. And that's why Patrick was built like a cooler. They're these smaller guys that are trained in boxing, martial arts, wrestling, all the different things, because their job is to get the fight on the ground as fast as possible so it causes the least amount of damage, right? But that was the first time where I was involved in something where I was learning somebody else's occupation that I didn't know existed. And it was fascinating to me, because in movies, you just have the 2 big bouncers. And they're important, but it's a very different job than what the cooler was. And Roadhouse really showed what a cooler does. It's about saving the property, getting the guys to the floor. The whole thing about the sawdust and the peanut shells, so that they slip and fall on the ground, these parts and lose on damage. And that was the stuff I love most about making of these movies, is the background and the research.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm just, again, I could really go down this rabbit hole of asking a million questions about all these different movies, because like you're naming off a bunch of really great ones. Before we get to the next question, I do want to do a quick intro for an awesome martial arts program. If you're looking to bring a martial arts program into your school to help you with a little bit more exciting curriculum and teaching weapons and performance training, this is Raptor Extreme Karate. Take a look. All right. Well, that was Raptor Extreme Karate. If you'd like some more information, please let me know. I can hook you up with Kevin Kowalczyk, 14-time world champion, as you saw in that video. Amazing program. I'm here with Bryan Carroll. My name is Jason Flame, host of the Master Motivation podcast. And gosh, we are just on a roll already. We've talked about a bunch of stuff already, talking about the movie industry, getting involved at 19 years old, Bryan. But let's talk a little bit about, working with legendary figures like James Cameron and Michael Mann. It must come with some big expectations. What have you learned from collaborating with directors at that level?
I think what's most important is working with people who have a vision, a very clear vision, and working with people that a lot of people in this business say they're very difficult to work with, or they're not nice, or they're mean, and I get that, where people may think that about very strong people like that. But I kind of take a step back and see people who are very focused and have a vision, and it's not that they're not there to be your friend. It's just they have a path, they have a vision, and they're going after it. And I respect that. And I purposely look to work with people that are difficult, as they say, because they have a black and whiteness about what their goal is and what their objective is. And you know exactly what flight path they're on. And that's really important today, because it's hard to find people like that. There's a lot of wishy-washy when it gets to be creative. And as a filmmaker or anything creative, you are always defending your vision. So where studios or people may say they're being difficult, I'm like, but they're being difficult because they've had to defend their vision since day one. They see it like this, and art is objective, and everybody has their input. Right. And takes hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of people to make a movie, and we're all there to help. But at the end of the day, the director's butt's going on the line. It's his name up there, and if the movie's great, sure, he's going to get a lot of credit. But if it sucks, nobody knows who I am. Nobody does. It's his ass on the line that's going to go out there. So I respect people like that have that created. It's very much like an Elon Musk. It's like exactly, he knows the direction he's on, the path he's on. I love that about those kinds of people. Just that very they know what they want, and they're willing to defend it. And are they being difficult? Maybe, if we don't understand what their objective is, but who isn't if you really are after something? You know what I mean? That's kind of hard. And I like working with people like that, because I've always found I learn more by getting along, or trying to figure out how to get along with other difficult personalities, but then by working with people who agree with me. My grandfather always says, find people who have an entirely different opinion than you and hang out with them, because it's going to teach you you may open your mind about something you never thought of. And two, you learn really good communication skills, because you really have to learn the weave of dialogue of how and that's what we used to do. Our generation, luckily, when we would meet people, we would immediately try to find out what we had in common. And we would then have something, and then we'd continue our conversation on that. Today, everybody's first they find a group that they have something in common with, and then they go to that group and only hang out with that. So nobody's getting new ideas. I equate it to when we used to drive across the country, right? You're always changing the radio station as it goes in and out. So you're always hearing new stuff that is culturally to that place. I used to love when we'd start getting closer to San Diego, and the illegal Tijuana Mexican stations would just be blaring across, and wiping everything else, or heading up to go to K-Wave or TNAC. You have to be in different places. Today is turn on satellite radio and you listen to the same thing over and over again. So you're not getting that. And that's kind of what I like about working with people like that is when somebody's really difficult or has is on a very different path or a very different frequency than me, I want to see how can that's the challenge. How do you get to that? How do you take that position? Because then in turn what happens is when things get heightened, you learn how to bring the situation down. The last thing you want to do is go to fists or go to war. So it's all about learning that dialogue. And I always feel good when you find somebody that it's going up here, but you're able to get them down here and you're able to bring the whole conversation back down. And they're the most appreciative of it, because they let their emotion get involved. And once your emotion's involved, well, the control's out the door, because we've all done it. All you need is to have a kid, and you realize how fast control gets thrown out the door, and emotion takes over. So that's why I really like working with those guys, is the solid vision, and just it benefits me to work with people like that.
Yeah, no, and I think you're right. I definitely feel that as a younger person, it was a lot easier to find those people that you had lots in common with. In my case, it was martial arts. You get with a group of martial artists and you just sit and talk about martial arts all the time. But I never really got outside that martial arts bubble. And I think as I continue to grow and move into different areas, I would have different perspectives just on business, on life. And as you talk with people that have a different idea of what it should be, it may not change your mind, but at least it helps you to understand. And I mean, I don't want to get political here or anything, but if each side would maybe just listen to each other a little bit more, right? Not saying one side has to be right and one side has to be wrong, but like just to understand, you don't have to agree with it, but just understand it and hear it out, right? Like I have lots of friends that have different viewpoints than I do, but we have some commonalities. We have things that we can agree on. We have things that we enjoy to do, but like maybe they see it a different way. They see things, and that only helps you to grow, right? Because if you don't change, nothing changes, right? And I think that's super important.
Exactly. No, and you're so right. It's especially now because of the political stuff. I think it's funny how something that 5 or 10% of what we disagree on kills the other 90% of what we probably do agree on.
Right.
And a lot of your political choices weren't your choices. You were influenced by your parents or by society. You either rebelled against what your parents' political sources were, or you were taught and indoctrinated with them and you went with them. So a lot of the stuff that you believe was like nothing that you really didn't have that much control over. You know what I mean? It was something that was slowly embedded into you, or you went through a change process in your life. It's for me. I work in a business where I'm very family first. I'm a Christian who married his high school girlfriend. You know what I mean? It's like I'm not so
same.
All right. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, but 90% of what everybody else in this business loves to do, which is tell stories, we do. And all the other stuff. So is it really worth, getting into the drifts, all those little things? And by the way, if we didn't have social media, that wouldn't happen because 90% of the stuff that's said behind the screen, you would have been popped in the nose for when we were kids. Let's be honest.
I love that. I love that meme. Whenever I see that meme come up, if no one would be able to say it to their face, whatever it was, and you see this kid just knocking some kid out. It's probably one of my favorite ones.
And I would say, look at the bigger picture. All right, there's a bigger picture. Why are the 3 biggest news channels not just ran but built by billionaires who were billionaires before they built the news channels? Right? It's about controlling information. These guys are billionaires and then built CNN and built Bloomberg and built Fox. You know what I mean? So it's always been about that. And the reality is, if the missiles are coming, we're going to be on this side, and they're going to all be on that side, and all those political stuff's going to go away because there's another structure out there that's much bigger than that. I believe it's to keep it's like what happened in Ireland, and it's to keep us fighting so we're not watching what the kings and queens are doing. So,
yep.
And at the end of the day, turn the news off and go out and talk to your neighbors. That's the world, man.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's where we're gonna do. That's what we did during COVID. We just said enough of this. We went outside and said, "Dude, I'm bored. I need to talk to a real human." We'll shout across the street, but at least we can talk.
Right. Yeah. Totally. 100%. Well, back to talking about, working closely with Michael Mann and working on Ali, Collateral, Miami Vice. What makes your creative partnership work so well, and how has it evolved over time?
I think for me, it's a couple of things. One, always being a student, always being a pupil, right? Always having your ears wide open and I call it recording. Always recording it and seeing. I realize now the 2 ways I've learned most in life is reading and listening to people who've been there before me. And I wish when I was a kid, I would have done the second one more. But for some reason, I thought I knew more than most people who were older than me.
Didn't we all?
I think there's so much knowledge out there. And to just be able to sit there and watch how they do. Because we're all influenced. When I produced or I directed finally, it wasn't me. It was pieces of Michael. It was pieces of Jim Cameron. It was pieces of my stepdad, Nicholas Brown. It was all these little things. My formula was mastered from little pieces I learned from all these other people, right? And my style and all that is because it's still a style. It's still a form. It's how you do this, and as well as movies and all that. So when working those kind of pieces, one realizing what the opportunity is to be there. It's like I could be, I should have been a soldier. You know what I mean? I'm in Hollywood making movies. This is, you know what I mean? It's rare that I'm here. Don't ever stop being grateful for that. Two, absorb as much information as you can from these people. But three, also realize they're, I don't want to say this badly, they're the ones that are out in front, and they're the ones that put the most on the line. So be there to support them, right? Take the ego out. There's only room for one ego on a set like that. And a lot of times we get bound up and then our ego get involved in that. And I know that because I've done it a million times. You know what I mean? So it's really about being there to support them. They brought you in because you're helping them make their vision. When you want to do your vision, you will want people that are helping you make your vision, right? But they're not making your vision. You're helping them. That's why they brought you in what you're specialized at and why you're there. And that's why there's hundreds of us coming together. No difference than getting to the moon with NASA, where they brought the best and brightest scientists and physicists and all that in there to say, we're NASA, we have the money, we don't know how to do this. You guys all come together, and who is the best physicist, who is the best, you know what I mean, to bring that group together and then make this what eventually became the Apollo rockets and got us to, got us to the moon. It's the same kind of scenario. It's like construction. Every construction job can be a little different. If we're doing this one, and okay, this could be a big brick house, and it's going to be a brick house with Sherwood, we're probably going to bring in one of the best bricklayers around for that particular house. That's what that is, and that's what our business is. For every show, you're bringing in different people that specialize for that, what is needed for that particular, what you're building.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I look at when you're training an MMA fighter, right? You got your boxing striking coach, you got your wrestling takedown coach, and then you got your ground jiu-jitsu coach, and each one of them serve a role to help that fighter to be successful, right? And all of them are part of the team, right? And going back when you were talking about being part of a team and taking the ego out of it, it's hard for people to I've always been a leader for as long as I can remember. I teach the classes myself. I'm the owner of my school. I am the person that's out in front. But as I matured and as I brought people onto the team, it's actually so much more fun to have other people engage and have other people get the credit for things and not have to take all of that responsibility and burden, but we all win together, right? If that makes sense.
Exactly. Well, and that's being a leader, not a manager. And I think what happens is a lot of the time we're having to be a leader, supervisor, and a manager. As our companies or things get bigger, it's relinquishing the manager and supervisor role and realizing I need to be a leader. In order to be a good leader, you want supervisors and managers who are better than you were at that job. Because it just, at the end of the day, it makes the over thing. It was the great Ronald Reagan quote where it says, we can accomplish anything if we don't mind who gets the credit.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, or it's something like that. It's one of my favorite Ronald Reagan books. But it is hard because also on a lot of my projects now, I just produce post-production. I'm involved in everything. So there's times when it's just me and I'm the only one and everything has to answer to me. But then when we come together to the bigger picture, now we have somebody a little bit higher. So now we're answering that. It's all feeding, it's all branches and everything feeding to the same place and all that kind of stuff. So, and unfortunately, it is the weakest link is what breaks the overall system. That's the hardest thing, is to keep is finding that. So, and really, at the end of the day, it's about, for me, being a great leader is just about morale. Is if I can keep morale up, and if I concentrate that, I make sure every day my morale is up, we can accomplish anything.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's talk about something that I know that you're passionate about. Your documentary, Why We Ride. It struck a deep chord with audiences. What inspired you to tell that story, and how did the motorcycle community respond?
Why We Ride is one of those, I'd say, God moments. It was like 2008 hit, got the feet kicked out from under me, like most of us did. 2009 comes along. It's like, no, now we're not making movies. 2010, 11 coming on. Now I'm just trying to save what it was like. It was a moment in my life where basically everything I built was all literally going away. I mean, we were selling everything. It was like literally there was no work. There was nothing. There was like all the people that I had that were working weren't working. There was no business. You couldn't even get a job. I couldn't get a job at a tenth of my normal rate. It was like the world was collapsing. Looking back during the time, I thought it was the worst time in my life. It actually turned out to be the greatest time in my life, the most educational time in my life, because you needed to have your legs kicked out from under you to become humble again. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's an ego and to be less prideful. So by the time, as many of us did, we were just fighting even to most of us, just even to try to maintain our home to rent it because we're going to lose it to the bank anyway. It was a horrible time. But so we're going through all that. Movies still aren't going. A documentary starts up, which I hadn't really done a documentary before, about airplanes. And I'm like, I'll do it. I will take anything. So I went and did it. It was a low budget documentary called Living Age Airplanes. But I learned about documentaries and I had so much, it wasn't fun, it was fulfillment. And I'm like, this is amazing. And so when we were done with that, I'm like, well, we still don't have work. We got to somehow figure out something. We know how to raise money from investors now. So let's do it for, we were going to tell a story about a guy named Ed Kretz. And as we got into it, I started realizing, no, we got to go deep. We need to, everything in my life is about why. Why has to start everything conversation, and not why the way my kids used to ask why. It was like, why are you doing this? Why is this important? Because once you put why in front of it, everything else just kind of happens for you. What in the hell just kind of happens. And so we started raising money, and we started going out and started filming. So how it started was because we had no choice. There was no work. We were put in a position, right? And there's no accidents. You know what I mean? We're put in a position where we have to figure out something. So we started, and as we start making this movie and interviewing people, I realized we're making a movie about passion. It doesn't matter. The motorcycle was, yes, that was our hub, but you could put anything in there. Why do we fight? Why do we put anything in there? What we were making a movie about was passion. And that's what I love to talk about most about is passion, because I'm so blessed to have that in many things that I get to do. And if I don't, I say, no, you're going to put passion into it. You know what I mean? So that there is passion there, which I think a lot of kids today won't do that. But if you just say, no, I'm going to, you will then have passion in it. But, and we started these stories, and, 72 people we interviewed, and it just became this kind of self-fulfilling thing. I was like, yeah, I'm making a documentary, but this movie's changing my life. There was me before, and now there's me that just went through this, where we're pretty much lost everything. And now I'm doing this, and it was kind of like a reset. It was like, wait, I need to spend more time with my kids. I need to spend more time at home. Maybe I don't need that big car I always thought I needed. Maybe I don't need that big, I mean? It's like, what is it that we really need, not what we want? And and of course, making it, then once we finished it and we started showing it to the motorcycle community, it exploded, especially with women and children. Because all we were doing is telling a story that they've been telling about anything else in their life, that was about being passionate and about what was something that connected people, not about what was something that didn't connect people. And what we were doing is, I was doing, whenever I started a project movie, I would do two lists. I said, what is it and what isn't it? And a lot of times, I'll start with what it is not. And the what it is not is usually with ourselves. It's not something out of It's not healthy. It's not practice. It's a lot of things. But then I made a list of what it is. When I go back and read it, it's like it's butterflies in my stuff. It's waiting to get home and get it's feeling the brain. It's like the smell of cut grass. That was reminds me when I played football. You know what I mean? It's the emotion. And once you establish what it is, and emotion, now I knew what I was making. So it was a process for me that I didn't realize when I was making it. It changed my life. To this day, of all the big movies I've done some of the biggest. It's the one that's still the most fulfilling, and it's the one that's made the biggest change. It turned into motivational, a huge. We had 1.5 million followers on Facebook after that movie, and we turned it, and we lost a very dear friend from brain cancer, brain tumors, and we turned it into a nonprofit. You know what I mean? So impactfully, it's done more positive to this world than any Titanic did. You know what I mean? So it's like when I go back now, I can't take credit because it's something that happened and we were all in the right place at the right time making this. And it was a leap of faith, and it was meant to, and I had to make it to be who I am today because it completely changed me.
Oh yeah. Well, you and I have had countless conversations about this very topic, about kind of that reset moment and kind of bringing you back to the ground, because I think in those times there were a lot of us facing that very same thing, where it's like we were way up here and we just needed to level it out a little bit more and get back to reality. and but it does it changes you. It switches the whole direction of what you do and why you do it. And like you said, once you know your why, the how is easy.
Easy,
And
yeah.
really finding that why. And so that was a big change for you in your life. Did that change the projects that you took on after that?
It pretty much changed my career because after that too, I realized I'm not. It's kind of like when you're racing and you realize, I love racing cars. And there's a point you get to in your life when you're racing, and realize I don't have a millionaire dad. I'm never going to go pro. I'm sorry, but in the world of car racing, there's not a person in F1 that's dad isn't a billionaire. You know what I mean? Or it's just it's really that was the great thing about being a kid in California with dirt bikes is dirt bikes still you could get to that level. You didn't have to come for money. You know what I mean? But even now that's changing. But what happened at that point is I was kind of like, I want to do things that matter, but what I want to do, what I'm really good at, where I can help you. It kind of is when you switch from being when you're trying to gather and it's when I kind of started to wanted to do things where I know 100% about. I know post production better than anybody. I'm going to just produce post production. I'm still going to do the big post production shows. I want to specialize in that. But you start to be, it's that moment when you start to become a teacher. And that's when it really was like, when you move to saying, I don't want to just keep accumulating. I now want to take what I have and start sharing that and reaching back and helping the next person up as I take a step up. You know what I mean? And finding those other ways to fulfill your career, because what we've learned again as COVID is whether or not I'm going to be in the black at the end of the year, I'm doing everything right, but the earth and the planet and God, everything else got their own little system going on. And we're going to be killing it. And then COVID comes along and we're like, okay, I guess we're going to shut down for 14 months. You know what I mean? We can't control. All we can control is what we have, which is our managing and emotions and stuff like that. So that was the biggest fear for me. So now when I do stuff, I do post stuff, or I help other people, do things. So if they're with me, and I warn kids, I said, if you're going to work with me, I'm going to be taking you way back to where film started, because I love talking about history and where it came. And I believe the only way you're going to appreciate this is to know where we started. So I think that's the biggest purpose is because it also allowed me to concentrate on this, which allowed me to do the next thing. Is okay, I know this takes this much time, so I can have my nonprofit doing this much time. I can spend time with my family doing this much time. I can get back to reading more like I used to. So it really was about getting back to. I used to say going 100. If I was always going at 100%, I was only getting 70, 80% done in a day. Now it's like, let me slow it down a little bit. And whatever I do, I'm there 100%. I purposely now, like, I have posts I'm like, okay, I'm working on this right now. This is all I'm working on. Oh, I'm going to go out and work with Ethan for an hour. That's all I'm going to work on. It really made me say, I'm going to divide my pie up. So I'm 100% there all the time, which got me back in the gym, got me back eating healthy again, all that stuff, because you also start cutting that time out for you, which is the biggest thing I think as fathers we forget is that's probably, I think one of the biggest things that came out of that was I read this great thing about, if you look at a check, there's a bunch of zeros on there. It doesn't matter if there's 1 0, 3 0, 8 zeros, 10 zeros. It doesn't mean anything until you put the one in the front of it. Mm-hmm. It gives those all values. And you're the one. And if you're not healthy and you're not 100%, your family, everything else, they're all depending on that. You have to take time for you as well. But I was feeling guilty about that. And after that moment, I was like, no, I have to be on my game. And I changed my, and really more just in the last 3-4 years, my eating habit, my knowledge. I read books all the time. What's this? Outlive. I just read about pedophilia. It's like just learning about that because we have to be at 100%. It affects everybody.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's really easy to be busy and that kind of go mentality. But when you really start doing things with intention is when it makes the biggest difference.
It does, and it's learning that no is not a bad word too.
That's a tough one, right? That's a tough one.
But am I just spinning in circles, or am I actually Am I actually moving forward? Progress. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, what makes us feel the greatest to me, anything is progress. If I'm just 1% better tomorrow, I think that's the biggest fulfillment there is in life, is that you've seen and observing progress.
Yeah, That's awesome. Hey, having been in the industry for decades now, how do you stay inspired and continue pushing creative boundaries?
I think it's two things. I think one, always being in touch with anything technically that's happening, because all through life of art and creativity, a technical advance can then help inspire you to do other things. Like an example I use is we built buildings with brick and mortar and the mezzanine floor and for a very long time, and then steel came along. And we started building buildings kind of the same way, even though we're using steel, until an artist said, well, but I can build anything now. So why don't I create curves and twists and make them taller? Because steel will allow me to do that. That's kind of one of the things that I approach is, whether it be AI or whatever it is, whatever's the newest technology, stay on top of that, because that can then it gives you ideas like, oh, wait a minute, I can now do this. Oh, I can do my own podcast. I now have the technology available to me that doesn't cost a fortune. So that is one of the big things. It helps trigger you for that kind of stuff. And also, to me, I think it's really important I call it priming. Every morning, just take 20, 30 minutes and prime yourself for the day to be in a position that you will be inspired and have passion. I read a verse in the Bible. I read Rick Warren's daily. I have all these my board that I have like certain quotes from different people or things that prime me for the day, so that I'm in a grateful kind of attitude. And by being in a grateful attitude, you seem to just kind of fall into things, and things you tend to become passionate about what you're doing, because you've just primed yourself to be in that. And it's a constant thing. You have to do it every morning. You have to do it throughout the day. So it's that. And also, I think it's also now not, I used to very much, who's going to pay me more? I'm like, now it's like more, if I'm passionate about what I'm doing, I'm going to get paid in ways that I never could the other way. You know what I mean? So it's looking at projects like, one, I really go after projects where it's young directors coming up, they need somebody to help them, or it's really big, mega difficult productions to do. Kind of like the last thing I did with HBO with Dune Prophecy, like just giant kind of stuff like that, because if you're a little scared going into it, it's going to be awesome. You know what I mean? If you're a little like biting up a little bit more than you can chew, that's where you want to be.
Yeah. Sometimes the best goals are the one that scare you the most, right?
Oh, they have to. You have. It's got to be. You got to put it way out there. You're like, this is so. I know I'm reaching for the stars, but I know I'll at least make it to the moon. But still, let's. You know what I mean? The moon's. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So tell me, explain to us, AI. How is that changing your industry, and how is that changing the way you work or the way things are done in the movie industry?
I think right now it does as all tools do. Everybody puts the tool in front of the craft, and then eventually it'll dissolve out, and then the craft will soon take over again. What I mean is every time a new piece of technology comes in, like when you could get cheap video cameras, every kid now had a video cameras making movies, and they're on YouTube, but they weren't making the same movies we are because they were putting the tool in front of the craft. I always say, like, here's Da Vinci's brush. Go paint me the Mona Lisa. It's never about the tool. It's about the craft. And AI is going to do some really cool stuff for us. We're looking at some things with it, but it's still a tool. And the one who masters the tool of AI is going to give you more opportunities to continue working. But if you're going to rely on AI to get you there, well, then you're going to be disappointed because you still need the craft behind it. So there are some things that's going to change, and I think it's going to make some things easier, but it's every time a piece of technology is coming to our planet, it seems to have creative jobs, not kill them, because technology always creates indecisiveness. When we cut on film, we had one editor, one assistant, the director. We had to cut the film. You know what I mean? So it's like you had to cut it in your head first. The minute we started cutting digitally on Avid stuff, well, I could have this version, I could have that version. I didn't have to make decisions as quickly. I could have a producer's cut, I could have a studio cut, I could have a director's cut. So it goes back to the fax machine. It's like, oh, wait a minute, we don't have to do this right now because we can delay, and then we can send our client the sign off at the very last moment on a fax machine. That was kind of where the whole delay because of technology started, I go back to. So AI is going to be an amazing tool, and I think it's going to open up more opportunities. But for the professional storyteller like we do, it's another tool that we're going to use. And yes, it will take some jobs, as everything did, but it'll also create other jobs. And those other jobs, somebody else will figure out what that other job is. We never needed an iPhone until the iPhone was made. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
Yep. Well, storytelling, right? I mean, that's a craft in and of itself. And one of the things that I loved about pro wrestling was that pro wrestling's all about telling a story,
Yeah.
right? And so tell me, as a storyteller, tell me more about gnarlynow.com and tell me more about, your take on storytelling and how you view it.
So most of us in our business, we have our own production company because we run everything through it. Gnarlynow.com was very much me because I used to have a thing I used to have books that were called BC Now, which was stuff that people worked with me knew like this is what we're doing right now. If it was a BC Now 3-ring binder, and gnarly because of the '80s, I just always loved that. So that's kind of where the title came from, right? It's very much me. Um, and also I very much love the way that it talks about stories because gnarly is something you would use when you're telling a story. And we are at the end of the day, the thing I love most about stories is all through life, before the wheel was invented, before the shuttle was invented, we always told stories. Our civilization, what we do that no other animal on this planet does, is we tell stories. And I believe the reason we tell stories is one, we understand the concept of time. And by understanding the concept of time, we know we have a limited amount of it. So we need to have these stories in order that things are passed along. And at the end of the day, every one of us, our immortality is going to be a story. We're all going to end up being a story at the end of the day. And that's what we are. And that's the fascination to me about stories, because that's really what you are. My grandfather is a story right now. And I tell a story, and I'm sure I've enhanced it a little bit more. And what he did in World War II.
Yeah, the fish was this big.
Exactly. But in my mind, to my kids, my grandfather, who Ethan's named after, is a story. To me, he was a person, but he lives on as a story. And that's what it is. Because at the end of the day, you end up being 2 or 3 lines on a chunk of granite. You know what I mean? But that's what must trigger the story. You know what I mean? Good father, loving husband, whatever that is. But that's my thing about stories is I think it's it is the most important thing in our society is to respect the story and to tell the story and to understand it and to keep those going, because it's most of who we are is because of stories we've heard, stories we've told, or the big one is the stories we tell ourselves. And that's the biggest thing as you become an adult is that battle in your brain of the stories we're telling ourselves. Are we telling ourselves negative stories or are we telling ourselves positive stories? Because your brain is always telling you stories of who you are. And 90% of them are like, stop, that's not who I am. You know what I mean? And that's why I tell my kids, I tell everybody, I'm like, it's right, whatever you want to read, whatever it is, but it's okay to daydream. It's okay to be a story. But tell stories and make stories up and all that, because we're all living that. We're driving in the car and the radio's playing and I start a story stuff's going on in my head and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be where I need to get this in a script and tell the world this story, right? Right? It's great if you can do that, and we're very fortunate where we get to do that with certain of our stories. But the most important thing is your story and your family story, and that's my. I think you can tell them this. When it comes to stories, it's that's at the end of the day, that's all we are is a story.
I love it because that's why one of the reasons that I love doing this podcast so much is I love hearing the stories. I love hearing everybody that's been on the show, like you said, has a story, has something to share, something to tell. And it's something that, 100 years from now, I'm sure YouTube or somehow will still be around. And your kids, great grandkids will get to hear this story potentially, right? Or, for me, it was like my kids might be able to hear the stories that I told through these videos. So it's one of the reasons that I just love doing the podcast is hearing people's stories. Well, listen, we're ready to wrap up here in just a minute. I thought, because, it'd be easy to do, I think, for you, but a couple of favorites, favorite movie from you.
My favorite all-time movie? I gotta be honest, it's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah.
I love The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly because it's a story with very little words. It's the same story told twice. When one person's in control and the other one's underneath him, then when it switches and then the other one's in control, the other one listens it. It's Sergio Leone is my favorite director. That is just, to me. It's one of those movies that when it's on, I've seen it probably 100 times in pieces, and who knows? It's just the best storytelling because it's visual. You're not listening to it; you're watching.
Mm-hmm. How about favorite TV show, recent or old?
Oh my God, that's a tough. I love Deadwood when Deadwood was on.
Yeah. Okay.
I liked Deadwood, but Oh my gosh, that's such a tough one because it's TV shows are like it changes through your life. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
it does.
it's like at this time that was my favorite show. At this time that was my favorite show. Right now I'm watching The Studio because it shows what a joke those guys are. So but like if I go back, what do I remember? I remember Deadwood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You brought it up earlier. Sons of Anarchy was one of my favorites. But I think you hit it right. Different times of your life, you got different shows. Because I'm sure when I was a kid, different shows were more interesting to me, and it just applied at different times of your life. So
it's like music. Where your favorite song was when you were 12 is very different than your favorite last song. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you have a favorite actor?
I have a favorite actor for different reasons because of who they were. I've been around. There's two actors. I can say because I've worked with so many actors. I have two actors I really respect. One, believe it or not, is Tom Cruise. He's the hardest working person, despite his beliefs and all that. He is the hardest working person I've ever worked with outside of an actor. His running, his way he runs his business. His work ethic is amazing. And the second was truly Patrick Swayze. He was such a genuine, good guy who saw his faults and wasn't afraid to talk about them. And you could tell he cared, and you look at where he came from and what he was able to do, and it was just pretty amazing. So my favorite actors are more because of that. To watch, I love watching. It's all the great ones from the westerns, Clint Eastwood. You know what I mean? It's like to watch them. I love those little. You know what I mean? It's probably Slim Pickens is probably my favorite when he's riding the bomb down. You know what I mean? So in the Dr. Strangelove. So
yeah. Right on. Cool. Well, hey, Bryan, thanks for being on the show today. Thanks for taking the time. It was great catching up. I'm heading to the gym, so I don't know when you're going, but I'm sure I'll see you there again pretty soon. And keep doing what you're doing because you're doing an awesome job. And I hope that we can work together at some point. I know we've talked about a couple crazy different projects, but who knows? You never know what happens.
No, thank you so much, and keep doing what you're doing. I love watching your podcast, and the more positive energy we can get out there to the universe, the better it is for everybody.
Totally agree. Well, guys, hey, listen, thank you everybody for watching us live. If you like this video, drop a comment and tell us what you liked about it, what you learned from it. And again, once again, please share the video and subscribe on YouTube. Guys, that's it for today. I'll see you next week with our next guest. Take care.